in this Planning Committee meeting of Colac Otway Shire Council on the 9th of March 2022. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Can I ask that council staff record all those present today? I note that there are 6 councillors present, and I've received an apology from Councillor McCracken due to illness. I'd like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that all Planning Committee meetings are audio recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be placed on the website as soon as practical. Are there any declarations of interest, please? None. Okay, I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the Planning Committee meeting held on the 9th of February 2022. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart, do I have a seconder? Councillor White, is that to be opposed? I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? It's carried 6-0. We're here today to hear verbal submissions from the applicant and objectors. Speakers will be called upon to speak immediately prior to consideration of the item by councillors. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. I'll note that I have, for item 8.1, Combined Planning Scheme Amendment C111 and Planning Permit PP 219-2021, 520 Corangamite Road and 30 Factory Road, Courtyard, hearing of submissions. We've got objectors here today, Jason Schramm on behalf of Paul Dunlop and Jason Schramm on behalf of Diane Dunlop, and we'll hear from the applicant, Andrew Beale. Okay, now we move to item 8.1. The purpose of this report is to support the hearing of verbal submissions related to the exhibition of Combined Planning Scheme Amendment and Planning Permit C111 COLA PP 219-2020-1 for the Red Rock Regional Theatre and Art Gallery, in brackets RTAG, redevelopment. I understand that Councillor Hart and Councillor Potter would each like to make a brief statement before we hear submissions. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. At the council meeting held on 27th of October 2021, councillors unanimously resolved to seek ministerial authorisation to prepare and exhibit a combined planning scheme amendment C111 and permit application PP 217-2021 for land at 520 Corangamite Lake Road and 30 Factory Road, Courtyard. Among other matters, the proposal included rezoning a small proportion of land currently in the farming zone to township zone. My decision on 27th of October 2021 was to support the matter proceeding to the next stages of the planning scheme and associated processes, which includes the public exhibition process. One of the submissions received during the public exhibition period makes reference to some councillors having a predetermined view on this matter, based on comments made at the 27th of October council meeting. I'd like to make it clear that I do not have a predetermined view or fixed view on the outcome of this matter. I attend today's meeting with an open mind and am genuinely prepared to listen to all views presented and take all relevant matters into account before making my final decision.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Potter.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Further to Councillor Hart's statement, I would also like to make it clear I do not have a predetermined or fixed view on this matter. I joined today's meeting with an open mind and I'm genuinely prepared to listen to objections and any alternative views and weigh up all the relevant matters before I make my final decision.
Okay, I'll now call for verbal submissions. You have 5 minutes for each submission, and we'll hear from Objector Jason Schramm on behalf of Paul Dunlop, and then obviously following on behalf of Diane Dunlop. And after your submission, councillors might have questions. So, Mr. Schramm.
Thanks, Mayor. If it's all right, might just use that 10-minute block for both rather than stopping and starting. And can I speak to the amendment at 30 Factory Road first and then the planning application at 520 Lake Corangamite Road after that? Thank you. Firstly, against the planning amendment at 30 Factory Road, based on planning legislation, regulations, strategies and policies adopted by the Colac Otway Shire and other state planning legislation. The land at 30 Factory Road, Courtyard, is zoned farmland and has no existing use rights other than farming. If the Colac Otway Shire Council is to consider an amendment in the zoning of land, it must follow state planning legislation and its own adopted policies relating to planning strategies. When considering this planning amendment relating to 30 Factory Road, Courtyard, Council needs to consider the 2007 Rural Land Strategy and the 2011 Rural Living Strategy, which both relate to the township of Courtyard and also the farmland at Courtyard. The area at 30 Factory Road, Courtyard, is considered in these adopted strategies of this Council. These strategies were adopted by Council after lengthy community consultation, community direction, consulting directly with small communities and also the broader community. Some of the notable points in these strategies are, as quoted in the strategies, the area included in the farmland of strategic significance identified in the Rural Land Strategy 2007 and has a high agricultural capability. That's relating to Courtyard. The Rural Land Strategy 2007 and Clause 21039, Rural Living, both discourage residential development in the farming zone and seek to preserve the agricultural base of the Shire. If there was to be future long-term expansion identified at Courtyard, it would be to the west along Corunnan Road, not at 30 Factory Road. The subdivision, Courtyard, is surrounded on all sides by high-quality agricultural land, which is included in the area nominated as farmland of strategic significance by the Rural Land Strategy 2007. Both the Rural Land Strategy 2007 and Clause 21039, Rural Living, discourage further fragmentation of productive agricultural land and seek to preserve the Shire's agricultural base. Rezoning of land around the township, Courtyard, to rural living would result in a net loss of productive agricultural land and would not be supported by ministerial direction. It also says, expect infill on existing vacant lots. That's all from the adopted strategies of Council. With these adopted policies of Council relating to the farm zone at 30 Factory Road, Courtyard, should lead one to believe that there would be a protection of that farmland and could not be rezoned or amended unless state planning policy protecting farmland or Council's own policies and strategies change into the future. Remember, there has been no community consultation into the rezoning of 30 Factory Road, Courtyard. There was not one phone call to the Dunlops, who were the only adjoining landowner prior to Council putting the amendment out for public exhibition. Consider that against the amendment application done a month later for residential land by Bakerland at Irrawillippi Road that still hasn't gone out for public exhibition, even though the area was identified in the 2050 growth plan after 4 years and several $100,000 in community consultation. Staff want to talk to all residents and neighbours in that amendment application before it goes out for public exhibition. There is one neighbour to this amendment and not one phone call from anyone at the Colac Otway Shire. I asked in a meeting convened about this with department planning staff, the submitters and the applicant, why the aforementioned strategies had been ignored when the staff had given support for the amendment, and the response I received was they considered the amount of land in the amendment application an insignificant amount. It's 4,400 approximately square metres, or 1 acre of land. I was unable to find in these strategies where it related to the size of land for amendments, and when the state planning legislation or Colac Otway Shire planning laws or strategies could be ignored or disregarded when the size of the land was considered insignificant. If this is the way the Colac Otway Shire Planning Department is now considering planning amendments, I would encourage every farmer in the district to put in an application one at a time to rezone 1 acre lots on their property, as planning legislation no longer applies apparently, as this amount of land will be considered insignificant. It might help with the housing crisis. Staff also stated that they had planned a growth strategy for Courtyard in the next 2 years to identify future growth areas. Well, why doesn't that apply now? The same strategies have been used by the Colac Otway Shire planning staff for years to stop farmers excising surplus houses that could be sold on to give a home to somebody. These houses now litter the district, rotting into the landscape because staff uphold proper process, policy and procedure to protect farmland. But because they like a theatre show, planning staff ignore these same planning strategies. In the report by planning staff that gives support to the amendment to go out for public exhibition, the main point is that the planning application cannot proceed without the amendment. This is 100% untrue. The applicant owns the adjoining house and approximately 6,000 square metres of vacant township zone to the north of the theatre. If the relocation of the house was to occur, the development could take place without an amendment, and under Council's adopted policies should be encouraged to infill existing vacant land in this township. I asked what study or report led staff to state in their report that would be an economic benefit to the area by supporting the application. The reply was there were not any studies or reports to justify any of these favourable comments. It was based on anecdotal evidence and opinion. I thought the planning staff had an obligation to write reports based on planning policy, fact and legislation. If COPAC was a similar theatre to base some of the evidence on, I remind councillors that COPAC runs at a monumental loss and that many theatre shows run at a cost to the ratepayer. In summary, councillors, I ask that you abandon this amendment. Help the applicant complete the project in the existing township zone, which should be encouraged. Abandon the amendment based on planning grounds. The protection of identified farmland, strategic significance from ad hoc approaches to planning. Proper process for council to follow its own adopted strategies. These strategies have been adopted again after lengthy community consultation. I call for you to abandon the amendment as no community consultation has occurred to this amendment whatsoever. Abandon the amendment because there are no planning grounds to justify the bending of rules, finding a way by writing a baseless bias report to support a project based on planning staff opinion. And best of all, there's an easier way for this project to proceed within the existing appropriately zoned areas owned by the applicant, not needing this amendment. Thank you.
Do councillors want to hold off on questions and hear your submission to the planning application? Yep, okay. Thanks,
Mayor. Just in relation to the planning application, Paul and Diane Dunlop fully support the project. 100% they'd like to see the tram project and the cafe and a new facility out at Courtyard. What they don't like is the rezoning of that 1 acre, insignificant or not, of land adjoining their property. If the Dunlops had have done some research into looking up all the strategies and things based on planning, that they would have themselves thought nothing could ever go ahead there because it's not in council's strategic vision or adopted policies or under any planning legislation. They're happy for the project to go ahead on the existing township zone, and if there was any matters like noise and those sort of things could easily be resolved. What they're worried about is outdoor entertainment in that 1 acre if it gets amended. So they have to look at this planning application, hypothetically I guess, If the amendment goes ahead, then so does the planning application. So if it goes ahead, based on what went out for public exhibition, they would like to see some changes. Now, a little bit disappointed representing the Dunlops here tonight that we've had a meeting with planning staff to try and resolve them. And if you read in your agenda, it says no submissions or objections to the planning application withdrawn. That isn't from lack of trying from the Dunlops, myself, or the applicant. We had a meeting back in February with everyone, raised a number of these concerns to do with landscaping, noise, light, and protection of privacy for the Dunlops. I was told at the end of that meeting, chaired by Doug McNeil, that we would receive a summary of that meeting and some of the things spoken about in a follow-up email. I had no correspondence whatsoever from the Colac Otway Shire. I had to follow up myself a week to 10 days later with an email saying, what's the next step? What outcome have we had? Have we got some changes in the plans that might go before council? Where are we at? We have another meeting which was convened last Friday. The applicant, planning staff and myself attended. There was some things raised about shifting a tram 11 metres. At the end of that meeting, I think with Andrew and myself, most things were agreed to, that with some extra tree planting and landscaping and some fencing and those sort of things, that all those things could be resolved and satisfied for privacy. And one of the big things was the deck, which isn't clear on the applicant, on the application. It doesn't really show a deck, but in part of it, it said under 3.1.1, the deck will be used as an interface between outdoor space and the tram building. Looking to the future, there is potential for the deck space to be used for outdoor theatre events. That concerned the Dunlops, that they didn't want that 1 acre of land becoming an outdoor entertaining area adjoining their property, and their house isn't that far away. In the meeting on Friday, it was agreed that there might be something written in there. And one of the planning staff said, yeah, we might say, yeah, well, I agree to this and we can withdraw the objection to the planning permit. Once again, I heard nothing from the Colac Otway Shire. I last checked my emails at about 9 o'clock this morning, maybe 8:30. No follow-up whatsoever from the Colac Otway Shire Planning Department. When I even asked them, we're having a meeting on Wednesday, when are you going to get back to me? And it was going to be before then. Well, if they've sent one this afternoon or after 9 o'clock this morning, I haven't received it, and that, again, is pretty poor to be here with no other option but to object to the planning application, that we need, the Dunlops need more guarantees for landscaping along the boundary for protection from light and sound and noise, a guarantee that there's not going to be outdoor events, and so I have to, on behalf of the Dunlops, object to that, the planning application, because we haven't been resolved. And I think it's a little bit embarrassing, to be honest, councillors, that you go out for public exhibition, you act in good faith as a submitter. I feel sorry for the applicant who in good faith gave up their time as well, for the Colac Otway Shire Planning Department to not follow up once after these meetings to have an outcome where the objection and the applicant could be satisfied. May happen in the next 2 weeks. I'm glad you're not making a decision today as per past practices, but so they need a guarantee that it's not going to become in the future somehow an outdoor entertaining area which impacts on their privacy and their lives and their farming and all those sort of things, because it runs directly along their boundary. Some sort of future guarantee for if it changes hands and it does get rezoned, it won't become other buildings on there, because it'll be appropriately zoned. Can't spit it out. And if it does change hands, or there's a private operator comes in, if it's zoned township zone, things can be built along there. They were looking for some guarantees that it wouldn't turn into something like that. So they have to object on those grounds, and pretty minor things that could be sorted out. If it was in existing township zone, they might say, can you build a bigger fence or put some trees up, and minor things that a lot of people come together and resolve before having to come to a planning committee. But unfortunately, hasn't been withdrawn because there was no follow-up from these meetings. Essentially a waste of everyone's time for the last month. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Schramm. Are there any questions from councillors for Mr Schramm? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mr Schramm, for your presentation just now. In relation to the landscaping that you're talking about, is your understanding that that would have been on the rezoned land, or from hearing your first submission, I wondered if you were understanding that the rezoning, your preferences wouldn't go ahead. I understand that. But so I'm trying to understand where's this landscaping? Is it on the rezoned land or is it on the existing township land?
No, it's on the rezoned land. It's the Dunlops obviously don't want the amendment to go ahead, but if it does, and the project goes ahead, they'll support that, but want some measures in place, like the landscaping, which would be on the southern boundary mainly, which I think the applicant had spoken to the Dunlops and it was pretty much nearly in agreement. Like I said before, unfortunately, we didn't get that follow-up from staff.
Councillor Potter, then Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. And I think you've answered my question, but just to be clear, apart from the rezoning, there seems to be the chance of a way forward between the two parties to satisfy the objectives in relation to amenity and privacy and all the rest of it. Is that, I've got that understanding correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And from my understanding from the meeting, the applicant was more than happy to meet those needs. But again, when I said, right, what's the next step forward? We'd come to things, it'd be something written in that, yes, I agree to do this, I agree there'll be no cost to anyone else other than the applicant, those sort of things. There'll be no outdoor entertaining things. Well, we're here tonight because none of that has been followed up at no fault of the applicant.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Jason, for your submission. Just a question around some of the broader concerns. I sympathise with all the broad points that you've made in terms of the strategic framework point of view. I certainly take that on board. In terms of the proposed location, that you've outlined some concerns around noise, traffic impacts and livestock impacts. If there was an opportunity to have the dwelling on or the proposed on a different location close by, would you see that those other impacts are still going to be observed? In other words, if you move it a short distance, are those broad concerns still going to be there?
No, they didn't have a concern. I think it was another submitter about traffic. There was no concerns about traffic. It was just noise and privacy running along there. Their preferable option is in the township zone. That's appropriately zoned. It was zoned that way before they bought it. So if anything goes ahead, well, it's to be expected. And if I didn't make it clear, it was like if it did go ahead and an application was in and there was no, say, landscaping to mitigate some noise coming out from there, it might have been a simple, put in a submission saying, I'd like to do some landscaping. The applicant goes, yeah, I'm happy to plant 100 trees along the back there, and then you withdraw your submission, we wouldn't be here tonight. So if it was in the existing zone, which is double what they're asking for in the amendment, that's owned to the north, no problem whatsoever with it. It can't be helped, it's appropriately zoned now. No need for the farmland to be rezoned, that's all.
Are there any other questions from councillors? No. Thank you. Thanks for your submission.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors.
I'll now call on the applicant, Mr Andrew Beale, to make his submission Mr. Bill, we can see you up on the screen, and if you unmute yourself, you'll be right to go.
Thank you, Mayor. No, just responding to Jason's presentation. Just a couple of things. The house to the north of the theatre carries the same historical significance as the theatre, in that it was the church manse where the preacher lived, who took care of services at the church when it was a church. The church was built in 1903. It was rebuilt after a fire burnt down a timber building in the same location. The manse, I'm not sure of its original build date, but it was renovated at the same time the brick building, which is the hall, that's the theatre part of our operation. The manse was built at the same time. It was built in the early 60s. Sorry, the manse was renovated at the same time the hall was built. The manse originally was a timber building, and it was converted into a brick building back in the early 60s at the same time the hall was built. Given that it has that historical connection to the church, I feel that it's not, in the interest of our community to remove it, to venture into another use for the site. And because of that, the land on the north of that manse or house separates a project that we might have gone ahead with, as in a cafe and that sort of thing, would separate it too much from the theatre and the art gallery, which was formerly the church. The manse, what was once the manse and now house, is used by a tenant, a young family. The tenant is employed at the local post office and enjoys, being able to live there. That's just the point on the manse. We as the applicant, just getting to the trees, are more than willing to provide as many trees as are required to help screen any noise or any visual impact that our building and our operation might have on Mr. and Mrs. Dunlop. Although I will point out that our application does not include planning for outdoor entertainment or outdoor noise. I'm surprised by Mr. and Mrs. Dunlop's knowledge of the state planning laws and the Shire's planning strategies in regard to planning amendments and land being excised from one zone to another. I would doubt that the small amount of land that I wish to have excised from my farm onto my town's block would impact the Dunlops in any way whatsoever. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Beale. Are there any questions for Mr. Beale? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Beale, the potential excising of 1 acre from the farm, does that have an impact on general farming activities?
Not at all. For us, the property that we farm up there is an out paddock. It's while it's is used as part of our dairy operation, the removal of that 1 acre will not have any impact on our overall agricultural output and our our contribution to the Shire's economy.
I have a question. I just wanted to confirm the outdoor entertaining area, or the deck. So from what I'm hearing from you, there's no plan for any outdoor theatre events or outdoor entertaining. It'd be, I don't know, more of a place for a quiet drink or chat. Is that the right understanding?
Yes, that's correct. All of our events are indoor. We have only ever had one outdoor event at our venue, actually two. One was for the Hazara community, who the Shire organised to have a special welcoming day there. Some of that was taken outside. That was quite a few years ago. And another one where a bunch of school children did a parade down the street of Courtyard and into the theatre, and did a small presentation in the car park before venturing inside.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Beale, if trees were planted on the 1 acre or around the area that might get rezoned, what could be put in place? Or, like, obviously that you would plant those trees in good faith that they would be there for 20, 30 years, or, in perpetuity, forever. Is that what your plan would be for them?
Sorry, what was that last bit?
Is that what your plan would be for the tree planting?
Yes, and I'm more than happy also any trees that we couldn't fit within our the rezoned section. I'm more than happy to, I will be fencing off a larger area to the east to further screen our operation from the Dunlops. The Dunlops had recently removed a large number of trees on their west side of their house, or it would be more the northwest side of their house. The trees were removed because they were dying and needed cleaning up. Some had fell over. But there were a lot of trees and they were all removed. Now, this has made our place and their place more visible to each other. And so hopefully, within a year or two of tree planting, we can reverse that and give each of us back our privacy.
Councillor White, then Councillor Hart.
Thank you. The proposal zoning is about 1 acre, correct? So how much of that 1 acre is the proposed expansion of the development?
The entire acreage, entire acre would be used because part of it's a car park and the other part's lawn and vegetation, and also sewage soakage lines on the lawn vegetation side. And apart from that, the tram that's already sitting in place is as it is. It only extends out. Well, it was maybe 4 metres into that new zone.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for your submission, Mr. Beale. My question relates to the cafe. I'm trying to understand, will that be under the same management as the theatre, if you like, or would you expect that might be leased out to someone to operate it privately? And the papers we have here do talk about an outdoor courtyard area. Is that right? Will there be people eating and what have you outdoor? How will that fit with the layout of the property?
So just to touch on the courtyard is a small area that sits right next to the church on the north side of the gallery. It's that little concrete area currently. I think it's about 5 metres wide, that section, and probably about the length of the gallery. It will be an enclosed courtyard, so it's more or less part of the building. It won't have a roof over it. So it'll be between the restaurant and the gallery. And the purpose of that courtyard was 2 things: to give people somewhere to sit outside without, being in a public space, or without being, out on the street. And also to maintain a visual impact of the church, of the old church building, from the road. If you're coming past from the Courtyard side, you can still get a good view of the church wall, the facade, and the lovely windows of the church. So we had originally were looking to build up to the church and have that inside our building, but we were requested by the planning department and through the advice of historical, what do you call them, the historical planning people, whatever their name is, to remove the new building from the church and keep it separate just that little bit, so as there was still a good visual from outside the building of the church. And sorry, Stephen, I've missed your first part. It's gone out of my head now.
Just the management of the cafe, was it expected that this would be a separate independent person running it, or would it be part of the theatre operation? What was your expectations there? The management of the restaurant or cafe would be partly independent, simply because we run our theatre and art gallery as a community volunteer organisation, and that type of operation couldn't be run by volunteers successfully. It would need someone's professional input. We haven't gone into a full study into a business model for that yet, and we'll be seeking further advice on that once we knew the project was going ahead. But definitely it would be run by someone, not a volunteer.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Beale, I take it from that answer you haven't decided formally how many hours the cafe stroke restaurant might be open yet, even though you've got proposed hours and associated liquor licence, but the fine detail of that operation hasn't been decided. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chris. I think the hours of operation that we've asked for is something like 7 days, and a good part of those days, that daylight time and into the night. This was just because we things have been that topsy-turvy with where the whole world's gone lately. We really don't know what will be the final business model, whether it'll just operate as a small cafe, or whether whether we can have likes of weddings, receptions, and that sort of thing there. It just depends on the market, and we haven't gone that far down the path. We've just left our options open through our application.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Beale, for your submission.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Before I go ahead, Mayor, the recommendation today is simply to refer this to the next council meeting. Are we still allowed to ask more broad questions about the proposal, which, even if it is that the answer has to be provided later, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks. So my question through you, Mayor, is if this land is rezoned, this section of land is rezoned to township, and the current plans show that it's essentially a car park, what's to stop someone from putting an application later on and saying, well, we want to, I don't know, extend the shop or do some other activity that you would normally allow in a township zone that might go beyond the car park?
Mr McNeil.
Through you, Mayor, there wouldn't be any guarantee. So if this land was to be zoned township zone as an extended area of zoning, there wouldn't be any guarantee if this particular development didn't go ahead that someone might, whether it's the current owner or some future owner, come along and apply to have some other form of use or development of the land.
Am I understanding correctly that if once it's rezoned township, if that goes ahead, then any future application would simply be assessed on the fact that that particular parcel of land is township, notwithstanding that this current application is based on it basically being for car parking and very limited use?
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. I guess we're considering this proposal on the fact that it's a bona fides proposal, but if it wasn't to go ahead and in the future it could be used for some other different purpose subject to a planning process, but it is noted that the access to that area at the back is past and through the current car park for the gallery.
Councillor Hart.
Sorry, Mayor, almost think we get there and then, you know, I'm not questioning that the current proposal, if it's rezoned, goes ahead. So I'm not questioning the current proposal goes ahead and functions for whoever knows, you know, for many years, whatever, everyone's happy. And then perhaps different people come in and say, we want to apply to, I don't know, extend the cafe or something like that on that land that's zoned, currently zoned farm, but becomes zoned township, that the assessment at that time will be simply on the basis, well, this is now township, with no regard to what the circumstances were that led to a small piece of land being zoned farm.
Through you, Mayor, I think we're saying the same thing. So in the future, whether this land at the front of the site continues to be used as a gallery or not, it's open for anyone in the future to apply to do something differently at the rear. Having said that, all of the land being rezoned is required for either car parking or effluent disposal area to support the proposed gallery expansion. So if the gallery expansion is to go ahead, it's on the basis that all of that rear part of the land is required in the form that it's being proposed as parking and effluent disposal. So there can't be any other use of that effluent disposal area other than for that purpose. No one's able to use it for, it couldn't be used for wedding receptions or anything like that. If an area is developed for effluent disposal, it has to be retained as an area for that purpose and no other use.
Is there any heritage overlay on the manse, on the church house? Or perhaps if you have to tell us later, that's fine, but I'm just trying to understand.
Through you, Mayor, there's no heritage overlay on the adjoining building, no.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. We heard in a submission about the contact with the objectors and the community, I suppose. Can you give us an overview of that process in relation to communication about this application, please?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor. As is the normal process when we get submissions to a planning application, we had a meeting with each of the objectors in attendance with the applicant and council officers, obviously with the intention of trying to understand the concerns better and see whether there could be any resolution of those concerns. That was followed up, as was said by Mr Schramm, with a meeting last Friday directly with him and Mr Beale, and there was further discussion about some of the opportunities to resolve concerns. I don't think there was ever any expectation, given that we would be resolving those concerns by today. It's obviously still a few weeks away before this comes to the council. It's still the office's intention that would be following up those issues in the intervening period to see if we can get a resolution.
Through you, Mayor, I might just expand on that. Since Friday, we have been discussing the matter with the CFA because there will need to be some amendment to some of their conditions. And they're also quite a key player in terms of landscaping that could be allowed because of defendable space concerns, etc. So we had expected to actually have the CFA response Monday or yesterday, but we have had discussions with them, and I understand we're getting the response today. We did send an email to both the applicant and Mr Schramm this morning to update them on the current situation and to just clarify one or two issues that arose on the meeting on Friday.
Yeah, Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. And early on, when this application was received, was it advertised locally? How did the local community know that this was on the table?
Thank you. Through you, I think that's a good question to ask, because certainly comparisons have been made with the Colac 2050 growth plan process, and I think a major strategic review of Colac's growth options is a very different process to the sort of process we're looking at here for a discrete development proposal on a single site. Obviously, with this proposal, there's community engagement through the public exhibition process, and the very fact that we're here today is for councillors to hear the concerns of the surrounding landowners, to understand their issues, and then form a view about the proposal at the end of that process. And this process does include a panel process if we can't resolve the concerns. The Colac 2050 process was obviously high-level engagement to work with the community about what the future of Colac looks like. If Courtyard was to be reviewed in the future in terms of the broader township growth, not just one particular site, there would be community engagement that occurs as part of a review of that council makes a decision after that process. But this sort of amendment is a very common amendment where a change in planning scheme is required to support a planning application. There's a legitimate process with an exhibition period, and there's every opportunity for the objector to ventilate their concerns and have them heard by council.
Councillor Hart.
Would it be prohibited if this application didn't include a rezoning? If the application was to have a septic field that went out on adjoining farmland and car parking through some sort of, or something like that, would that be prohibited? And that's why the rezoning the changes under the planning permit can't proceed unless the rezoning occurs? Or would it not be prohibited to approve that? Not asking for what you think's best, but I'm asking whether it would be absolutely be prohibited to do it that way.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. It would be prohibited. So we wouldn't be able to consider this proposal if it wasn't for the change of the zoning.
Just ask a question around setting of a precedent. What's the difference? I guess I'm just asking your opinion. Like, this is what's not to stop this becoming a precedent for farmers trying to excise a house off that might be on a road, or is this setting a precedent for rezoning farmland, small parcels?
Through you, Mayor, I think that this is a very different situation to what was presented by Mr Schramm in his submission, where there's a comparison made with how council policy is applied to dwellings and subdivision in the rural zones. Those activities, in terms of approving a house on land or whether it's subdividing a block off from a farm, they can have long-term impacts on the way that area is used for farming into the future. What we're looking at today is a very discrete development proposal, which is an art gallery looking to expand. It's very specific. It's not a very common type proposal. It's about whether or not this has net community benefit, and that's something that council will have to make a decision on at the end of this process. Yes, there are very definitely planning policies that seek to retain agricultural land in this area and protect it from uses that aren't agriculture. But at the same time, there's policies in the planning scheme that try to support small town growth and other policies supporting economic development. This proposal has positive social and economic benefits. It's a question of balancing those with the policies around taking a small area of land out of agriculture to achieve that. So the officers have supported putting this proposal on exhibition, believing that there was some benefit there that did outweigh those policies, but this process is to test that. Every application has to be considered on its merits, but I certainly think this isn't comparable with an individual application to consider a house on a farming zone block of land.
Are there any further questions? Okay, well, councillors, thanks very much to both the people who have made submissions today. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? It's up on the screen. Councillor Potter, do you wish to move the motion on the screen?
Mayor, I'm happy to move that recommendation as a motion, yes.
Yeah. Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Just like to thank the submitters. I think this is the next part in the process to take this matter to a ordinary council meeting for a decision about what's next.
Councillor White?
Similar to Chris, and also to say, I guess it is something quite unique that's put before us and it needs an opportunity to go before council.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 6-0. Thank you, councillors. That concludes this planning committee meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.